So, hello, this is Dermot here from ChemDoc, and I'm presenting this webinar today on building a successful COSHH management program. You're all very welcome, and thank you for taking the time to attend. There is a small Q&A tool, if you can see it. I think it should be up on the top of your screen that you can click on if you need to send in a quick question as we go through this. But I'll give you my contact details anyway at the end of the presentation, and you'll be able to email on any questions you have afterwards. So we only have 30 minutes. I'm going to try and keep this as quick as possible. I might end up flying through some of it a bit too much, but again, as I said, you can come back to me with queries afterwards. So this is the first point to make is this is not a technical webinar on COSHH. This is really about the fundamentals of building a strong, sustainable COSHH management system. So it's based on over 10 years experience that we have in both the healthcare and general manufacturing environment of actually getting out there and writing COSHH assessments, but also of setting up good COSHH management systems in different workplaces. And it is a combination of the good and the bad practice that we've seen, ideas that work well, ideas that don't work well, and eventually mean the system will fall over. So one of the first things I want to cover before I get into the actual bones of the assessment is just one quick slide here on safety data sheets versus COSHH assessments. The difference between safety data sheets and COSHH assessments, a common mistake that I hear is when you go out to a site, you hear people talking about safety data sheets and COSHH assessments, and very often not knowing which is which. A safety data sheet is a 16-page document produced by the manufacturer of a chemical, and it contains 16 sections, and it outlines basically the main hazards and some emergency information about the chemical itself. But the manufacturer creates it, and it's about just the chemical itself. It's produced in the UK to European standard. We're not sure what's going to happen with Brexit, but it is going to be, even if it does change to a UK standard, it's not going to change the format generally. But for now, it is to a European standard in the UK. A COSHH assessment then, well, COSHH assessment is a risk assessment of how you use that chemical in your work environment. It's developed locally in each work environment by the employer or by the people that are using the chemical. It is separate from the safety data sheet, and it should be customized for your local environment. COSHH is UK legislation, but although it is UK legislation, a lot of people do use it as in different countries around Europe because it is quite good, and they use it as a standard to follow, but it is essentially UK legislation. So a safety data sheet is a document that is produced by the manufacturer, and a COSHH assessment is a risk assessment of a chemical that is used in an environment that is produced locally where you use that chemical. So I have an outline there of the different areas I'm going to go through in developing your good COSHH management system. I'm not going to go through them now in detail because we're tight enough for time, but we'll go through them as they come up. So the very first step, when you go to develop a COSHH management system, the first thing you need to do is document what is your actual company structure. So simply, what are your different departments, and if you have multiple sites, what are your different sites by department? So while this sounds quite simple, and it is, the one common mistake we see in this is people will start off with, instead of thinking what are my departments, they will think what are my departments with chemicals in them, and they'll think of a laboratory, and they'll think of their pharmacy, etc., etc. And we would recommend you do not start at that point. You start with list all your departments: HR, accounts, pharmacy, maintenance, etc. List every single department, and you then go to the department and you see what chemicals they have. So list every single department. There may be some scope to merge a few together, particularly maybe some of the office-based ones, like, as I said, HR, accounts. You can merge them together maybe as just admin because they're working in the same office and generally carrying out the same work. But list out all your departments, and we would then say assign a role of at least one person in each department that they are going to be the go-to person for COSHH in there. Now this is fundamental to, and something we're going to come back to time and time again as I go through the presentation, is you must get people in individual departments to take ownership of their own COSHH assessments and of their own chemical safety as much as possible. Now, they may not have a huge amount of work to do, and we'll see that as they go on, depending on which path you take, how much work they actually have to do, but they will have to take responsibility and they will have to be the leader in that department for it. So you now have your list of departments, and you have a list of people for each department that are going to take ownership of COSHH for you. The next thing you need to do then is you need to get a list of chemicals by department. So basically you need to build your chemical inventory. Now, a common mistake that happens here is that you have your list, we would say, of 15 contacts, and someone in EHS will send them out an email and say, can you send me on your list of chemicals? And what you'll get back will be 15 emails, hopefully, with varying degrees of quality in terms of you may get an email with just a list of one-word product names, and you may get another email with an Excel file with 7 or 8 columns, and they've put way more work into it than was ever needed. And it's up to you then to try and pull all that together into one big template, and it can make a lot of work. So to stop that happening from the very start, you actually design a simple template in using something like Excel and outline what is the data you want and send that on as a blank template to each department for them to fill out. The kind of data you need is very simple. First of all, you need a product name. You need to encourage people to be very specific in product name. So instead of just filling in something as simple as bleach, you actually fill in Domestos Bleach Original, the full product name, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different grades, strengths, types of bleach, etc. Some with additives, some without. So just to say bleach will not tell us what product you have. So give us the full product name, which is Domestos Bleach Original. The full manufacturer name, which is preferable to the supplier, because all data ties back to the manufacturer. And finally then, if you are collating data for laboratory environments from the likes where you're buying products from the likes of Sigma, Merck, VWR, or any of the big lab suppliers, you need the product code. So you need the AB123, the manufacturer's product code. And the ideal time to get it is right now when you're actually putting your inventory together, because you will end up going back afterwards to get that information in order that you can get the right safety data sheet. We would recommend then, when you get this data, so when you get the inventories from all the individual departments, you pull it all together in one place. Don't just leave that inventory out in the individual departments and leave them to manage it there on their own. Pull it all together so you have all that information in one place. You now have a list of departments, and for each department you have a list of products that are contained within that department. You're obviously going to have a lot of overlap, especially in a healthcare environment. You're going to have products that are used across the whole hospital and products that are only used in some departments. We would recommend, if possible, try and centralize the next step, which is sourcing your safety data sheets. So rather than putting it on individual departments to go out and get all their own safety data sheets, we would recommend you pull that into one central place and get them all together at the same time. The reason being, first of all, it avoids obvious duplication of products. So if you have to, for example, if you take the example I used previously, which is bleach, it's probably in every single department in the hospital. So you will have 15 people going off to Domestos, getting the bleach safety data sheet. And that's obvious, and you don't want to do that 15 times. Ideally, you want one person to go and get it once, and it's now available to everyone. But what's often less obvious is the duplication of manufacturers. So if you take a supplier like Ecolab, for example, they would supply into a lot of hospitals. Most departments will have Ecolab products, but they may not all have the same ones. But most of the work in sourcing safe data sheets isn't actually getting the single safe data sheet down. It is going and finding, where do I go for this manufacturer's safe data sheet? Do I need to go on this website? Do I need to go, is there a different UK website to the US one? Do I need to email them? Who's the right person, etc.? When you've done all that work, it's as easy to go and get 10 safe data sheets now as it is to go and get 2 of them. So that's why we say, if you put it in centrally, you only go to each manufacturer once and get all their safe data sheets at the same time. If you're doing it that way, and if you are delegating the work out, so it's not just one person going and getting all the safe data sheets, the natural way to delegate it then is by department. So we'd say person A is sent off to get safe data sheets for the theatre, person B is sent off to get safe data sheets for endoscopy, etc. And we would say again, don't fall into that. If you're delegating, delegate by manufacturer. So send person A off to get safe data sheets from these 10 manufacturers, person B to get them from these 10 manufacturers, etc. So it kind of follows on what I've just said, but just the manufacturer is the only place to go direct for the most recent safe data sheets. And what I mean by that is the supplier is not the place to go. So suppliers may have safe data sheets available for you, but they would only have got them from the manufacturer themselves, and you have no way of knowing, are they the most recent, or did they source those safe data sheets 5 years ago and had them sitting in a folder in their own office for the last 5 years? And the only way to know that you're getting the current up-to-date safe data sheets is go direct to the manufacturer yourself. And finally, at the time that you record, when you source your safe data sheets, we would recommend you record 1 or 2 basic bits of information about them. Mainly the revision date. I would also put in there, and it's not actually on the screen, but I would also put in there that you also put in the dates that you sourced the safe data sheet on, so that you know that this safe data sheet, the revision date is 2017, and it was sourced in 2016, 2017, etc. Would also recommend that you record the document source. So where did you go to get that safe data sheet? Again, in a year's time or 2 years' time, when somebody goes to check all these safe data sheets, to check if they're up to date, you don't want them to be starting with a blank plate. You want to record the information that you have gone to get now, so you know for Ecolab safe data sheets, this is the website you go to, or this is the person that you email, etc. So just a quick sentence record where you got it from, so that when somebody comes back to it in 12 months' time, they don't have to redo that work. They just go straight to what you've done and do it again. And that will save a lot of time in the years to come to keep them up to date. So, excuse me. So now you have your safe data sheets, you have your inventory by department, you have a list of products, and there are safe data sheets attached to them. You've decided now who is actually going to write your COSHH assessments. And what I've outlined here is, I've outlined 4 different options for how you can decide who is going to write your safe data sheets. 2 options that we would not recommend, and 2 options that we would recommend. So the 2 options for that, I'll start with the 2 that we would not recommend. And the first of these is that your safe data sheets are completed by, your COSHH assessments are completed by EHS with no input at all from the staff. So by EHS, it's a generic term that I'm using for, it could be a person in health and safety, your safety department, your safety rep, but essentially, by EHS, I mean someone outside of the people in the department that are using the safe data sheets. And by staff, obviously, I mean not the safe data sheets, the products, but by staff, I mean the people in the department that are actually using the products. So your first option is that your assessments are actually completed by EHS with no input at all from staff. So somebody in the EHS department sits down in their office, they write up all the COSHH assessments, they print them out, and they stick them in a folder. And that is utterly a waste of time. It is a complete documentation exercise only. It's by far the least recommended option of the 4 that are here. And it will ultimately achieve nothing. It will possibly achieve compliance from the point of view of ticking the box to say that you have these documents in a folder, but they are never going to be read, they are not going to be kept up to date, and your staff will not have learned anything from it. The second option is the complete opposite of that. So they're completed by staff with no input at all from EHS. Now, in a lot of ways, this isn't a bad option if you have the resources to put into it. But it can be very resource heavy, because it ultimately means that you have to have someone who is fully COSHH trained and competent in every department within the hospital or within your organization. And that can take a lot of work and take a lot of resources, because these people have to be trained. They're not working at COSHH every day, so they're not going to be experts. So they're going to spend a lot of time researching, etc. So it's going to take a lot of work. It also opens up then the possibility of inconsistencies in quality and procedures across the organization. So it opens up the possibility of people in the micro lab making recommendation A for corrosive products, and people in another lab across the corridor making a different recommendation for the same product. So while it's not as bad as the first option, it's not an ideal option because it takes a lot of work, and as soon as pressure comes on in a healthcare environment, which, as you guys know, will happen quite a lot, the system is in danger of falling over. But what you would get out of it would probably be good COSHH assessments, and they would be useful, but just there is a lot of work in getting to that point. So the next two options, options 3 and 4, in terms of who are the right people to write your COSHH assessments, would be the two that we would recommend a bit more. And to be honest with you, the two are very similar. There's very little difference between them. The first one is, or the third option in total, is that your COSHH assessments are completed by EHS in conjunction with the staff. And so the difference between this and the first option I talked about, where the EHS department sat down themselves and wrote them, this is where somebody from EHS will actively go down, ideally down into the work environment. So you literally sit down with the people in the theatre department and you talk to them and about the chemical products, about how they use them, what PPE they have available, what spill kits, etc. they have available to them, and you write a COSHH assessment based on that. If you note any actions, they can be noted there and then, and they can be worked on. But EHS are bringing their expertise down, but they are working with the staff down in their own environment. What you will get out of that will be a COSHH assessment that is relevant to the staff and that they will feel some ownership of. So when they get that COSHH assessment, so when that person from EHS goes back up to their office, maybe they sign it off, they print it off, or they publish it on the system. When the people in the theatre get that document, they will feel some ownership of it. They will understand it, and they will follow it. So it'll be something that they will be able to work with. The fourth option is quite similar. The only difference would be it's a slight, almost nearly changing of wording, that you would get the staff to write the COSHH assessments. So it's a bit like the second option on the previous page. The staff do write them, but EHS do not wash their hands out completely. The staff write them, but EHS sign off on all documents before they actually go live. There would be some training required, but the people that are writing the COSHH assessments in this case will not need to be fully COSHH trained and fully COSHH competent, because they are not going to be signing off on them. They will fill out a certain amount of basic information, and essentially it will go to the EHS, and the EHS people will be the people that are fully COSHH trained and competent, and they will sign off on it or make some changes, etc., if required. Similar to the previous option, what you get out the other end will be a document that will be useful and relevant to the staff, and they will feel ownership of it. So when they need to use a chemical, they will look at this document and they will say, well, this is actually relevant to me. It's based around this department. We had input in writing it, and this is actually a useful document to me. So options 3 and 4 they're quite similar, but they will be the options that we would recommend for who are the people that are actually writing your COSHH assessments. The next thing you need to do is you need to design a COSHH template for writing COSHH assessments. So again, this is a common mistake that we see people make, and it's a common area where COSHH assessments will fall over, or a COSHH management system will fall over, is people will go and download a generic COSHH template that will be a lot of work to complete and will not be feasible in the long term. So we would recommend you design a COSHH template, and it's worth putting the work into this. If you put the work into this from the beginning, it will stand over time. So the first point on the COSHH template is keep it simple. Keep it simple and keep it relevant. An overly complex COSHH template will fail every single time. I had one particular client who had an 8-page COSHH template, and they couldn't recommend why the staff aren't keeping them up to date. It was almost 2 hours of work to write a COSHH assessment on the 8 pages. And what came out the other end of it, no one was ever going to read the whole 8 pages when they went to use a chemical. So it was just way too complex. So keep it simple and keep it relevant. Use as much multiple choice, drop-downs, checkboxes as possible. In an ideal world, I would say the only free text in your COSHH assessment should be a description of the process. Everything else should be drop-downs, checkboxes. And there should be drop-downs and checkboxes that are not generic information, but that are local to your site. So if you take something like spill control, you would sit down with maybe your facilities manager or whoever would be in charge of a spill happening and say, well, what are the different options for spill? And they would tell you information like, well, they can use the spill kits in the red wheelie bins, or you can call the emergency response team on extension 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So you come up with these 4 or 5 options for spill. You populate your template with this. So when somebody goes to write a COSHH assessment, when it comes to the spill option, they look at the hazards of the product, they look at the quantities they're using, etc., the people involved, and then they make a call on the 4 or 5 pre-approved statements that you guys have put into the template, and they take off the ones that are relevant to this. So again, what comes out the other end then is it's quick and easy to fill in, and what they get out the other end is information that's useful and relevant to them. Also, free text, it encourages copy and pasting from a safe data sheet. And if you find yourself copying and pasting information from the safe data sheet, again, to be blunt, you're wasting your time. It's not a genuine COSHH assessment. You're only putting information straight from the safe data sheet and dropping it straight into your COSHH assessment, and it's not really achieving anything. Finally, and it's only a small little tip, but we have found that it works very well, is put your own brand logo on the template. So whether it is a general NHS logo or a logo of your own local trust or your own local organization, put that onto your template, because first of all, it highlights ownership of the document, that this is a document from our organization. And secondly, it differentiates very quickly and very easily between the safety data sheet and the COSHH assessment. So you train your staff that this document with our logo up here, well, that's the COSHH assessment. The other document from the manufacturer, that's the safety data sheet. Now, I have 2 slides here that outline the key elements of a COSHH template, and it's getting a bit more technical. And to be honest, I'm not going to go through it in detail because I'm tight for time, but you'll be able to go through this when I send this presentation on to you. The only bit I'm going to look at here very quickly is just the rating, which is the very last one. It's a part that we strongly recommend to put into your template, that at the end of your assessment, as you've gone through the quantities used, the hazards of the product, etc., you come up with some kind of a rating system to say this is a high-risk process, this is a low-risk process, or this is somewhere in between. So something that your staff can quickly understand and look at and be aware from the very start. Okay, I'm working with a low-risk process here, or I'm working with a high-risk process. I need to stop and think, etc. So we would strongly recommend that there's a lot of different systems out there. The one we use ourselves is a 5x5 matrix. But as I said, there are a lot of different systems there, and it could be as simple as just low, medium, high. But we would definitely recommend, as part of your template, you implement a rating system somewhere at the end to give an overall score to the dangers involved. So to recap very quickly, what we have now, we have got our departments. We have got our inventory of products, so we have a list of products now by department. We have gone and we have sourced the safe data sheets for those products, and we have put together a good template for writing COSHH assessments. We've also decided who is going to be the person that's writing these COSHH assessments. So when you've all that done, the actual writing of the COSHH assessments is quite simple. But just a couple of tips on it. First of all, training, and I suppose it is kind of stating the obvious, but just ensure that the personnel involved have received the appropriate training. So if it is your EHS people that are writing them, make sure they're fully COSHH trained and competent. If it is maybe people on the floor that are writing them, well, make sure that they've got appropriate training to write the assessment to the level that they're going to write it to. So if they're only going to write it and EHS are going to sign off on it, well then they probably don't need full COSHH training, but just make sure that they have enough training that they can write the COSHH assessment to the best of their ability, and ideally EHS should only have to sign off. But ultimately, make sure that the people that are writing the COSHH assessments have sufficient training. Secondly, make sure that the personnel involved have been allocated the time to complete the assessments. So if someone is working in an environment and they have 15 COSHH assessments to write, it's important to know that their supervisor or line manager or whoever they report to knows, well, they need the time to do this, and they have to be given 1 or 2 or 3 hours per day over the next number of days or weeks to write these assessments, and that time is actually allocated to them and they're left alone to do it. And finally, just when you're writing your COSHH assessments, as I said, if you're following what we said previously, and it's not just one person writing, it's a team of people that are writing them, It's important that you don't just send them out and let them write COSHH assessments and they come back in 3 or 4 weeks' time and they're all finished. I would say you try and get them together, even if just for 10 minutes, to share knowledge, rather than answering queries individually with individual assessors. Pull them all together so that if there's any queries, you can discuss them openly and everyone can learn from them. So you've written your COSHH assessments, you have your safe data sheets, etc. So the last thing then is you need to distribute both your COSHH assessments and your safe data sheets. Your COSHH assessments in particular, but we would recommend your safe data sheet as well, side by side, must be made available for use for the staff that are actually using the products and involved in the process. Ideally, you want to distribute them across the whole organization in soft copy. You can distribute them via your organization network, maybe drop them in a folder or something, but ideally it would be through some kind of a document management system, which most healthcare environments would have some kind of a system there that would allow you to manage documents, will allow you to search for products, manage revision control, etc. In certain cases, it's just important to be aware, in certain cases, there will be certain areas where you will not have access to the network or access to a PC, and you will have to keep printed copies of certain assessments there. It would be important in those areas to only print the assessments that are relevant to that area. Don't drop in a folder of four or five folders of a few hundred assessments if there's only 5 products in an area. Pull out those assessments, print them out into a nice neat folder and leave them available there. And it's very important that once something is printed, you put strict procedures in place that if the COSHH assessment is updated, that you also print the new version as well. Sorry, now I saw a question just popping in there about workplace exposure limits, and I'll come back to that in 1 minute. So just to finish up briefly, because I'm just conscious we're coming to the end of the half hour here. So you now have your safe data sheets written. Sorry, you have your safe data sheets collected. You have your COSHH assessments written. You have them distributed. Again, it's very important now you put something in place that this system is kept up to date. The second that it's finished, you can't let it go out of date. So first of all, for your existing products, so for the products you have already on site that you've just written your COSHH assessments for and you've sourced your safe data sheets for, with your safe data sheets, you need to check on a regular basis that the safe data sheet that you have is still the most current one. Ideally, you should do this on an annual basis. And again, like sourcing the first time around, ideally, this could be managed centrally. So it makes it much easier if this is managed centrally. When you do, a common problem we see is when you do get a new version of safe data sheet, make sure you remove the old one and that staff only have access to the current one. We would regularly go into environments where you would be given a folder of safe data sheets. There may be 300 products in there, but when you go and look at it, you'll find there's one product in 3 times with 3 different versions of the safe data sheet. So when you get a new safe data sheet, whatever way you're using to distribute it, make sure you remove the old version and staff only have access to the new one. And for your COSHH assessments, put procedures in place that all your COSHH assessments are going to be reviewed on an annual basis. And if a new safe data sheet is sourced at some stage during the year, make sure there's a procedure put in place that triggers any COSHH assessments that were written with the old safe data sheet now need to be reviewed. It will probably only be a 1 or a 2 minute job, but it's important that they're done straight away and they're not allowed to build up, because there may be changes in terms of classification, etc. to the product, and that the COSHH assessment needs to be updated when the safe data sheet has been updated as well. For new products, so this is when, and again, this is where people fall down quite regularly, is they put something in place to manage existing products, but there's nothing put into place for, well, what happens if a new product comes in? So first thing is, that product needs to go onto your inventory. It's critical that that product is put on the inventory, ideally before the product comes on site. So rather than a product coming on site and then 2 weeks later, it's now added to your inventory and you're constantly chasing your tail. When a new product is coming, you go and you add it to the inventory before it comes in. The safe data sheet should also be sourced before the product is brought on site. In some cases, and I think it's a good way to do it, to source the safe data sheet day one for the new product that's coming on site, the staff member that's bringing in the new product is tasked with actually sourcing the safe data sheet from the beginning. And I think that's a good way to work, because it gives the person that's bringing in the new product a bit of ownership of it, and it makes them responsible for getting the safe data sheet rather than just going out and getting a product. Similarly, like that, a COSHH assessment must also be written. And again, we would recommend as much as possible that this COSHH assessment is written before the product is brought on site. Now, in some cases, the full assessment can't be written because the process may not have been fully tied down until the product is there. But as much as possible, you want to write the assessment before it comes on site. The reason being that the whole idea of a COSHH assessment is you're assessing the risk of using this product on your site for your staff. So if, for example, and it's an extreme case, you bring in an explosive product. You don't want to bring in an explosive product, leave it down in the middle of the pharmacy department, and then say, okay guys, this is an explosive product, how can we now use it safely? Well, your staff are already in danger because it's already in there. You need to assess before it comes in, well, obviously we need an explosive proof cabinet, or we need to decide, well, we can't bring this in because it's just not safe. So the three things that are outlined there: the inventory, you must add it before it comes in; the safe data sheet ideally before it comes in; and the COSHH assessment also ideally before it comes in. If not possible, do it as soon as possible after it comes in, but ideally all should be done before the product comes in at all. That's kind of it on the actual outline of the system for managing your COSHH assessments. I've kind of rushed it in the end because with a bit of a blip there with the sound. I'm just going to go over just very quickly just some key points, because a lot of it ties into these key points, and this is what the success and or failure of the system comes down to. First of all, keep all aspects of the process as simple and as relevant as possible. So the more complex you get and the more irrelevant to the actual people that are using the chemical, the more likely that it's going to fall down. Staff involvement is absolutely key. So from building your inventory to writing your COSHH assessments, keeping your COSHH assessments up to date, the less connected the staff are with all that process, the less useful the whole process is, and again, the more likely it is to fall down. Keep your staff involved at all areas, and that's it is gone beyond COSHH at that stage. Like for all aspects of health and safety, staff involvement is key to how useful and how successful it's going to be. And finally, then, it's just about keeping the information up to date. Don't just complete COSHH assessments as a project. What you need to do is you need to get your COSHH assessments written and get them distributed to your staff, etc. But as part of that, you need to build in a process that is going to keep them up to date. So a project to write all your COSHH assessments is not good enough on its own. It's a project to write your COSHH assessments and put a process in place that's going to keep them all up to date. So just very briefly, just about ourselves, about ChemDoc and how we can possibly help with all this. So ChemDoc is basically, it's a chemical safety management system. You start off with, we get an inventory from you, and we set that up on the system for you by site and by department, as I've outlined in the presentation. We then go and get the safe data sheets for you. So that's one big admin pain that we take off you. We go and we get all the safe data sheets from the manufacturers, and we keep all those up to date. So we take all that admin pain out from you in the middle. We also then set up a COSHH template exactly as you want it. So we can set up a COSHH tool. We customize our COSHH tool to match your organization needs with drop downs and checkboxes with information that we've got from you. And above and beyond then what we've talked about in this assessment, during this presentation, outside of COSHH, you can also use ChemDoc for printing GHS labels, for printing chemical safety and COSHH management reports, etc. You also obviously use ChemDoc once you've written your COSHH assessments and you've sourced your safe data sheets. You use ChemDoc to distribute them all to your staff, so you don't need to consider that as well. So you can see the kind of clients we work with. We started off in the healthcare environment, but since that, we've moved into pretty much all types of manufacturing, education, etc. So you can see some of them there. So after this webinar later on today, I'm going to email you all individually with a copy of the presentation I ran through. I'm also going to give you a transcript of any queries that are raised and covered today, and I'm going to come to one or two of them there now. and there's one or two queries that have come in that I may have to go to some of our consultants about, that I'll also email you on about afterwards. So and from that, so on the email I send you, you'll have my own direct contact details. And if you have any further queries, or if you'd like to find out more about the ChemDoc system, or actually have a look at this ChemDoc system, you can reply to me, and I can set up a personal demo of that for you. So just before I finish off, so one or two of the queries that have come in, and I'm just going to have to look at my tool here to see, can I see these queries as they've come in, and what had popped up there. So there was two that I noticed there, and there was a third one that I took a brief look at, and it disappeared. So one question that was asked via email earlier on today was, should we create different COSHH assessments for different departments using the same product? And we would recommend absolutely yes, that you should, because even though it may be the same product, and even though you may believe it is used in the exact same way, the environment that it's used in may be different. So, for example, if you think of something as simple as domestos, it may be used in a theatre for cleaning. It may also be used in a canteen for cleaning. It may be used in the same way, but both environments are very different. One is a very clean environment, another is an environment that has members of the public, staff, etc. open to it, and you need to take other considerations into place. So we would definitely recommend, yes, that you write a different COSHH assessment for each department and for each different use of a chemical. And the second one, which was a question that had never been asked before, but it came in on email today, was, can you write a COSHH assessment without a safety data sheet? And it's a funny kind of a question, and I talked to consultants about it here. Firstly, we would say that really, if you have a product on site and you cannot source a safety data sheet for it, you should not have the product on site. In an extreme circumstance, if you can find there's no other way to get that product and it's absolutely critical to your process, then you can do your best to write a COSHH assessment without the safety data sheet. But really, we would recommend, if you cannot source the safety data sheet for the product, it should not be on your site, and you should look to source that product from a supplier that can supply you with a safety data sheet. The last question that came in there, and I'm going to run back through my presentation very quickly, was about your workplace exposure limits. And I'm going to look at it here very quickly in here, but I'll email on a more detailed response afterwards. But a question popped up there about was, how do you know if a product has workplace exposure limits and what they are? And basically, how you generally do that is you're looking up EH40 2005, which is the UK workplace exposure limits. And if you Google this afterwards, you'll find it's available in a PDF that you can download. So when you get your safety data sheet, if you go to section 3 of the safety data sheet, that will outline what are the substances that are contained within the product. So any product that you have, bleach or floor cleaner, etc., that will have a number of substances contained within it. And they will be listed out in section 3 of your safety data sheet by CAS number. You can then go and search within EH40 2005 for those individual CAS numbers to see, does this product have a workplace exposure limit? And if it does, what is it? It's probably one of the more complicated parts of the COSHH assessment, but it is quite key, because if your product has a workplace exposure limit, then you need to look at, well, how much of it are we using, and ultimately, do we need to get some industrial hygiene monitoring or on-site monitoring in to see, is it safe in here for that? So it is one of the more technical parts of the COSHH assessment, and is the one part that you would certainly need to be a fully trained COSHH assessor to decide that. One last thing on that is just that on your workplace exposure limits, that is actually built into the ChemDoc system. If you are using ChemDoc, that as you go through the product, the COSHH building within ChemDoc, you can pull in your workplace exposure limits automatically without having to go separately out into the EH40 for them to source them. So, look, those three questions that came in, I'll document out an answer to them, and I'll send it on to you later on today with a copy of this presentation. if there's one or two questions, that I think there was another one that came up that I may not have had a chance to answer. It just flashed my screen for a second. But if there is, I'll pull that out and I'll send that on to you guys as well. So thank you very much for your time. Sorry about the problems with the sound, or what we thought were problems with the sound, but it seems to be okay afterwards. And we'll be in touch by email later on today. Thank you very much.